Hey, what's going on, social media world and NBC Church family? Always good to join you on the weekly. I'm here with my good friend, Pastor Bob. How are you?
Uh, Pastor Dave, I am doing okay, although it is October and the weather, we just cannot see what's going on each day, what's going to happen. So today it's raining, it's dreary. Yesterday over the weekend, it was gorgeous. What are you going to do?
Here we are, full in the fall days.
That's right.
And it's definitely rainy today, but we got a great video in store for you. We're going to be talking about some upcoming events. We got a little bit of a good praise from this weekend's activities here on campus, and we want to tell you something that's coming up that you need to register for like really soon. So you want to pay attention to that. And then we have an outreach opportunity that we've never done here before. So we're so excited about that. And then we want to talk about an interesting promise, a covenant that God made in the book of 2 Samuel that applies to you. And so pay attention to this video as we cover all of these things here in the weekly. Where else can you find such amazing content besides right here with Pastor Bob and I?
You can't, Dave. That's just the deal. You think you can, but you can't.
Very good. So good to be with you. Tell us, Pastor Bob, what was going on Saturday here on the NBC campus? What was happening?
We had our annual trunk or treat event here, and that's where people bring their cars, they decorate their trunks. There's candy there. You know, kids are coming dressed up. I saw a lot of superheroes. I've never seen so many superheroes in one location as we had here last Saturday. I saw camping trucks. I saw Hogwarts was there. I saw there was a kissing booth with a dog from Lady and the Tramp. It was pretty intense.
There was a ski lift. There was a snow mountain.
That's right.
There was an EMS truck.
Oh my, that's right.
Services.
If anything happened, we were covered.
We were ready to take your blood pressure. It was an amazing weekend. Yeah. A lot of kids streaming through, a lot of love going on. Yeah. A beautiful day that the Lord gave us.
It was gorgeous. Yeah.
But thank you guys for serving. Thanks for decorating trunks. Thanks for greeting. Thanks for helping out, set up, tear down. It was an awesome event as usual. And special thanks to Rachel Lenore and the kids ministry team for putting that on each year.
Yeah.
Moving forward, couple exciting things that are happening. One of them is coming up pretty quick and you need to register for it. It's called the Underground Sessions. Who's our speaker this time? And tell us a little bit about it, Pastor Bob.
We have well-known speaker Os Guinness of the Guinness family. Yes, he is coming out. Os has written like 30 books. He's a voluminous writer. The topic he's covering this time, he's going to be talking a little bit about what's going on culturally speaking in the West, and how the role of faith can play into helping us move into a season of thriving. He's just a wealth of knowledge. I got to chat with him the other day, and he's very humble, even though he's really accomplished. So make sure you come out. We're going to talk a little bit about this Carpe Diem redeemed theme. I think that's going to be kind of a wake-up call to Western Christians in terms of what's at stake and some of the discussions that are happening within culture today. But make sure that you register. We're going to have some food, and he's going to be streaming in, but it is going to be a live in-person event. So, come out for that. It's going to be, we always have a good time at the Underground.
Make sure you register right
That's
now.
Right
Click
now.
the register button. Let us know you're going to be here. And make sure you pronounce us correctly.
Not the great and power Oz. It is us.
There we go. So just fast forward a little bit, keeping our eye on the topic of outreach. We are going to have an important vision meeting coming up in November about a new initiative that we're excited about here at Millington involving the ministry of Alpha. So what is Alpha, Bob?
Alpha groups have been around for a long time. And the way they like to say it on their website is that they are a series of conversations centered around the Christian faith. So this is really designed to be a group where if you're a Christian and you want to learn how to share your faith, you should come to this group, because as we go through and watch the material, you'll learn about how to engage with people that are asking questions. If you're somebody who's asking questions, this is a really safe place for you to come and have open dialogue about your thoughts on faith, meaning. We're all asking these big questions of life. Now, this meeting in particular, what we're looking for is about 5 to 10 core leaders to help launch this ministry come February. So we're not totally launching it yet. We're going to launch it after our Contend conference. And we're looking for people with ideas who are interested in helping to spearhead this. So, so that's the main purpose. If you just want to know more about the group, you're also welcome to come too. We're going to feed lunch. This is also something you have to register for. So right here, click on the registration link. Let us know you're coming so I make sure we have enough food for that day. So that's Alpha.
Awesome. Big journeys begin with small steps.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Register for Alpha.
New initiatives begin with small steps too, Dave.
They do. So we're going to start with a vision meeting, and this is a non-committal meeting, right? This is just, hey, come for lunch.
That's a good point. This is not a commitment. This is, I want to come and learn more about this and pray about whether this is something God is calling me to. And I'm learning a lot recently about there's things in life that you just have to pray and trust that God is going to bring, he's going to send the rain, that he's going to bring the harvest, and he's going to bring the right people. Too often we think we get the right strategies, we get everything in order, and it's going to come together. It needs the power of God behind it.
Speaking of the power of God, we were talking about an amazing promise that God makes to his servant David, and really by extension to all of God's people in our sermon series this past weekend through 2 Samuel chapter 7. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of the importance of 2 Samuel chapter 7?
So
our series, and maybe throughout the whole Bible.
Right. Yeah. So I think to summarize it pretty quickly, 2 Samuel 7 is kind of the hinge in a lot of Old Testament narratives, but also in terms of this book. David, up to this point, has in 1 Samuel 16 was promised that he was going to be king, and then he had to wait a long time until he actually got to ascend the throne. And and the week before, you were talking about David coming into Jerusalem, uniting the kingdom after the kingdom had just been a mess. David now ascends to the throne. And I was really struck by, in 2 Samuel 7, it's the first time that David gets to kind of sit down and reflect on everything that's happened. And in the midst of that, God gives him the promise that he and the people that follow him from his line, there's always going to be a king on the throne, leading God's people, governing God's people well. And what happens is, you of course, if you study the Old Testament, eventually the kingdom breaks apart again after David and after his son Solomon. And at the end of 2 Kings, rather, there is everybody's in exile. Like the northern kingdom of Israel is wiped out, never gets reconstituted. The southern kingdom of Judah, which had lines from kings from David, they are preserved, but they're taken into exile in Babylon. And they're sitting over there wondering, God, where's our king? And what we emphasize on part of the message is that that's the tension at the end of the Old Testament, is where is God going to keep his promises? Where is our king? And that's the backdrop to which Jesus Christ steps into history. And he, through his life, his death, his resurrection, guarantees that he is the king who will always be on the throne, coming from the Davidic line. So it's a promise not only, that spoke to the people and David at the time, but also carries on into eternity, and is a great promise for us as well.
You said forever. Wow. So God will promise a king that will be on the throne forever.
That's right.
So that should be a little bit of a hint that maybe this is something larger than a regular human son of David. So very important chapter, very important passage. And just to go applicational for a second here, when you were talking about this whole theme of rest, you said that we, number one, don't get a lot of rest, but number two, maybe we don't value rest, or maybe we don't pursue rest in the right way, or maybe there's some things that we're doing that are inherently preventative of us getting rest. So I don't know, that's making me uncomfortable, because when I feel tired, I don't like to blame me, but it's okay. Maybe you can give us a little nudge there a little bit. What behaviors might I be involved in that would be actually impeding my own rest. Though I am saying I want rest, how might I be getting in my own way?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what in the past, just coming strictly from the text, what we find is that David comes into Jerusalem. He's in his palace that they build, this beautiful palace with these cedar panels, these beautiful, expensive wood things. And he looks over at the tabernacle where the ark of God, the presence of God is sitting. And he's saying, why is God living in a tent when I'm living in this beautiful house? Let me go build one for him. And there's a couple of different ways that you could have come at this passage. I think there could have been a theme of the promise, which I tried to kind of weave in secondarily, and I focused primarily on this idea of rest, because it's so interesting to me that David actually finally kind of got to relax, but then he automatically wants to get back and start working and building things. And we are like that. I think, and we said in the message, we live in a world that doesn't value rest. And what I think I mean by that is basically like there's always more to do. There's always more deadlines to meet, and rarely do we get a time to just sit back and lay that down. And because those things are always pushing us, the natural inclination, I think, of the human heart, and especially in 21st century American culture, is I just need to work harder. If there's a problem going on, let me work harder. Let me get another job. Let me do. And again, there's elements of trying to, provide for yourself and your family and things like that. But sometimes we're trying too hard to build our own kingdoms, and it may not be what God is calling us to. Like we talked about in the run through, this was the thread that we added in the message on Sunday that it wasn't quite there, was the idea of what do you do when God tells you no? And I had one or two people come up to me in between the services that said, you know what, that is so true. Like, God, I feel like you're calling me to do this. I don't want to do that. I'd rather do this. And then we say, God, I'd rather go and do this thing over here that's more glamorous, that's easy. And God says, no, I want you to go and do this thing over here. So like, for an example in my life, we've talked a lot. I've talked a decent amount about this in messages. We have a special needs son, and it's often a conversation in our house where I say, this is not what I imagined it was going to be like. And I didn't sign up for this. And yet this is what God has given to us in our family. This is the calling he's given to us. And it's hard. Like if I had to choose, I wouldn't have chosen this, but this is what God has given to us. And there's a lot of beauty within that. Pete Scazzaro, who's the guy who wrote all those emotionally healthy books, emotionally healthy spirituality and all that. And he's got a quote where he says that we find God's will for our lives in our limitations. And that's something I've meditated upon for a while, that when we're so concerned about finding what does God want me to do? What's my calling? Look at what your limitations are. What has God given you, and let that be an element of figuring out where he's calling you to invest and follow him in your life.
That's very important. Thank you. I appreciate the applications there. And it's important for us to find that place of rest as Christians. Hebrews chapter 3 and 4 talks about this rest that's available for the people of God. And I don't know that we totally understand that. So this was a good reminder for us to dive deeper and understand the rest that's available through the work of Christ, and then submitting to what he has for our lives, rather than going about my own plan for my life.
And you think it's also the rest doesn't necessarily mean like you think I'm just going to sleep unendingly. And I don't think that that's necessarily really what it's about. I mean, getting a good night's sleep is an important thing, but you can still be active and yet find your rest in Christ. And that's sort of the tension I think we live with sometimes.
And you can be really inactive and still be exhausted.
There you go. Because you may be going in a direction in a way that God is not calling you to go in.
Yeah. So that's a good word. Just to go back to the biblical textual side a little bit about this. This is something that I've thought about and talked about a lot in terms of this Davidic covenant and its importance.
Yeah.
And what does it exactly mean? And, is Jesus the fulfillment of this, or is there a partial fulfillment or exhaustive fulfillment later? Have you ever thought about that question? And where do you come down on that issue.
I often kind of like the both and, so I think there's an element that, yeah, certainly Jesus fulfills this. I guess the question is, in theological circles, is there going to be, like, when Jesus comes back in the future, does he have to go and sit on this throne in Jerusalem, right? People have different opinions about all that, but
Yeah.
I think there's a sense, textually speaking, there's a sense that Solomon fulfills some of what he's talking about, and then the Davidic Covenant is ultimately fulfilled with Christ being the one who's going to reign forever and ever.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of different kind of nuances to that conversation, but there's a theologian named Voss, and he helped me understand.
That's his first name or his last name?
Last name Voss.
Voss.
And he was about, I don't know, 100 years ago or so, and he was kind of the godfather of already but not yet stuff. He was the one that first sort of talked about that, and he had this way of communicating what's fulfilled now and what's to be fulfilled later. And I think I'm indebted to him, and I think a lot of people are, without maybe even knowing who he was. But there's a way of thinking about David and being fulfilled in Christ now already. There seems to be ascension language, and then there's a way of thinking about something's yet to come in the future. I'll see if I can share my my Voss chart. So he used to use this. Can you see that chart?
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful looking chart right there.
So he used to use this sort of timeline to communicate this thing, that there's the present age, right? And Jesus Christ comes, and his reign on his throne has begun, and we're kind of in this square right here. Mm-hmm. And we're in the already but not yet kingdom where he's reigning, and then when he returns, there'll be a full realization of the kingdom when it's consummated there. And then the coming age is the age of restoration. So Voss is famous for having explained this in this way, that we live in this tension in between the times and the already but not yet. And I think that's a good way of thinking about how Jesus fulfills the Davidic Covenant.
Yeah.
Something for the Bible nerds out there. So very cool. What else about 2 Samuel chapter 7 was helpful for you and meaningful for you as you studied this past weekend?
Well, I think, I use those three images: the tent, the house, and the throne. And in some ways, like, it's not obviously not bad to go to God's house and find rest in the presence of being with his people. I think the challenge is sometimes we always want to be the one who is in control of the plans of our life, and surrendering and giving over to God. That's the hard thing for most people. And that's what causes the most exhaustion. Living at the throne of the King and just totally trusting him and giving your whole life over to him, that ultimately, I think, is where you find total rest. Maybe total rest is a better way of saying it. Because you're living how you were made. We were made to be ruled. We were made to be to governed. And we are not king of this world. So, I thought a lot about that this week. Where in my life am I really trying to build my kingdom? Where am I relying on my plans rather than just taking a step back and praying and saying, God, is this what you want me to do? I think it's part of what David's motivation was. But then the other piece is just this is amazing that God says, I'm gonna give you a promise. I'm gonna keep it. And David's response to that in worshiping God, like, so many times we treat these things as very flippant. Like we don't think, like, we take God for granted a lot of times. I think, God, I just assume you're going to do this if I pray. And then if I pray and you don't give me what I want, I'm done with you. Basically, some people treat God like that, like he's almost like a genie in a bottle type of thing. And that's not how God operates, So God in this text basically tells David, I don't want you to do that. I want you to do this. Here's a promise. Like there's kind of all these tension points within that text. Yeah. And I think ultimately the place you want to land is where he was, in the presence of God, praising him, marveling at his beauty, which is where we ended yesterday. That's the place to be, because when we're finding things of the world more beautiful than God, that often takes us in different paths and gets us off of the will that he has for us, his revealed will anyway.
I was watching Johnny Anderson Tata teach one time about this topic about God saying no to her, because of course she prayed for physical healing. She's
Right.
a paraplegic. She's in a wheelchair, has this awesome ministry to special needs people called Johnny and Friends. And she was actually in Israel sitting next to the pool of Bethesda later in life. And she said, in that moment, I started to thank God for all the times he told me no. Because, of course, she would not have had this global outreach ministry of compassion to others who are experiencing special needs. I mean, this has been her platform, and this is what God chose to do with her life. And it all stemmed from God saying, no, I'm not going to physically heal you, at least in this life.
Yeah.
And so,
well, that's what I'm talking
David's
about.
prayer for the temple. A house for God would be nice, but how much more majestic and wonderful was God's actual plan for David's life to build him a house and a dynasty that would last forever. So the Lord has better plans than we can even imagine.
And then that's the sense that, like, if Johnny Erickson Tata went back to the beginning of her life and had all these dreams of what God could do for her, was one of her dreams that one day I'm going to get so injured that I'm disabled and God's going to use that to start a ministry through me, she probably would have said, no, I don't want that. And yet look at how God's used that.
Right. In such a way that he gets all the credit.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So great word. Anything else before we move on?
The only other thing I would say that I think, God's response to David in terms of building the house, he basically says, no, I'm perfectly happy in the tent because I get to dwell with my people. And the idea that God is with us no matter where we go. Like there's this image of like there's a stationary temple versus a tent that can move around with people. And that to me, I thought just kind of reveals the heart of God for being with his people and caring for them and walking with them. Like that one quote from that I used from Ralph Dale Davis about God moving with us through the rigors of life. Where was it? Yeah. God is the pilgrim God. Share. I can. Yeah. Let me put it on the screen here. Talking about that incarnational piece, he says, he's a God who travels with his people in all their topsy-turvy here and there journeys and wanderings. Do his people live in tents? So does he. Are they a pilgrim people on their way to the land of promise? So he is the pilgrim God, sharing the rigors of the journey with them. I really like that word rigors, because some of us, our lives are more rigorous than others. And the fact that no matter what rigors come on the journey, God is right there, moving on up with us. And that was a really special quote, I think.
Well, it's important for us to remember that God is with us and that he is.
That's right.
The incarnational savior. So that's great.
Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Pastor Bob. Next week, we will continue in our series through 1st and 2nd Samuel, as we will look at an encounter in chapter 9 where David remembers that he has made a covenant with Jonathan, Saul's son. And at this point, the house of Saul has almost fallen apart. And so David is looking for someone that's still of the house of Saul that he can actually show love to. So just as in this week, Pastor Bob talked about God fulfilling his covenant with David, in the next sermon, we're going to talk about how David is going to be fulfilling his own covenant with the ones that he has made promises to. So it's a little bit of a role reversal in this next sermon. And we're going to talk about this concept of loving kindness, or in the Hebrew, it's chesed, and God's loyal love, his faithful love, his kindness, as displayed through David. And so we look forward to that, and I hope that you will join us as we continue in our series. Anything else before we wrap it up today?
I don't think so. That covers it all for today, anyway.
All right. Have a great rest of your week, guys. Let us know if you need anything. God bless.
God bless.